Hello, I'm Steve Jones, and I'm running for the Kentucky House of Representatives District 23. This is another one of my videos where I'd like to discuss a specific issue that's important to me and I hope is important to you. The issue I'd like to discuss is unions and labor organization and the right to work laws and all the related items to that topic. I grew up in a very pro-union household. My father worked for the local utility company as an electrical serviceman and gas meter serviceman, and for over 40 years he was a member of IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So I saw firsthand growing up from the time I was a child until I went off to college and moved out on my own until his retirement, all the benefits that unions provided him. My brother, who recently retired, was a correctional officer, and he was a member of the union AFSCME. And so I've seen through him as well all the benefits that unions have been able to provide to him. A lot of people don't realize all the things that unions have done and what the world was like before unions. It's because of unions you have paid holidays, safe working conditions, vacation times, sick leave, decent wages, safe working conditions, and much more. One of the biggest things that unions did was help create child labor laws. Before unionization, child labor laws weren't in existence. That's when you see and watch those old documentaries on pre-union existence where they show children working in the mills making fabric and clothing, children as young as 5 or 6, 7 years old in a factory working 10 hours a day. It's because of unions we don't have things like that anymore. A little bit of history about unions. Back in the days before the child labor laws, it was pretty much tyranny on the part of management because unions didn't exist. Workers were on their own. If they didn't like it, they could quit, they could starve to death, they could just forget about having a house, feeding your kids. Management simply didn't care. Then in 1935, the National Labor Relations Act was passed. This was a time when there was a strong labor movement in this country and the government was very supportive. What this law did at the federal level was allow workers to organize, to do collective bargaining, to form unions, to strike, to collectively say, we need safer working conditions. We need to have children stop working in factories. We need better benefits. We need better pays. And they were able to do this as a collective group. The benefit of collective bargaining is immense. Imagine if you worked at a factory and your supervisor, maybe a mid-level supervisor, fired you because, I don't know, some minor thing that really wasn't a fireable offense. And you went to your next supervisor level up and said, John Doe fired me and this is why. And they were like, well, that's his choice. He gets to fire you. Too bad. And so you're fired, even though it's something you probably shouldn't have been fired for. It could have been a personality conflict, a personal issue, something that probably, you shouldn't have been fired over. And it could be any kind of thing, but let's just assume it's something that for the most part you probably normally wouldn't be fired over. So what do? Well, if there's no union and you're by yourself, you either quit and walk away or you fight. Well, the only way for you to fight on your own is to hire an attorney, start taking people to court, and who has the money to do that now that they're unemployed? Most people don't have the money to do that, and management knows that. Big business knows that. They like that. They like the fact that you're on your own and you can't take on a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar corporation when you get fired because it's just you. What collective bargaining does is it allows you, if there was a union in that same factory where you were working and you got fired unfairly, you could go to your union steward and your union officers and file a grievance. And the union, let's say it's a factory that has 1,000 employees, it could get to the point where the union says you need to rehire this person or all 1,000 of us are walking out the door until you rehire this person. You see the advantage of collective bargaining? That one voice became 1,000 voices, and management has to listen to 1,000 voices. So that's the power of collective bargaining. And all that was enacted, like I say, in 1935 with the National Labor Relations Act. Unfortunately, then in 1947, the government control switched and the Congress was predominantly Republican and was listening to the corporations, much as our current Congress is doing, and they passed the Labor Management Relations Act of 1947. So it's not the National Labor Relations Act of 35, it's the Labor Management Relations Act. It's also called the Taft-Hartley Act, and that's probably something easier to call it since it's the name is kind of similar to the first one. But the Taft-Hartley Act was passed in 1947. And that made several major changes to the way that unions could work. One of the key things and the problem that faces us today with right-to-work laws is that act allowed states to create right-to-work laws, which they are not right-to-work laws. It's a crazy name. I think the Republican Party probably made it up because, who doesn't want to work? We all want the right to work. That's a great thing. Why would you not support right to work? That's not what it is. Right to work laws are an attack on organized labor and the common man trying to make a decent living. They are not a right to work. They are a right to have your rights taken away. So that act, the Taft-Hartley Act, said that federal government could create or could allow states to create right to work laws. And what those laws do is when you're in a union, you pay dues. And those dues go for things like legal representation in that kind of scenario I gave you where maybe someone was fired and they needed a lawyer to help get them back. If there are organizations on strike, a union's on strike, there'll be a fund to pay out to union members to help keep food on their table while they're not pulling a paycheck because they're on strike. And all kinds of benefits to the unions. The lobbyists, everything from the lobbyists they'll have to the benefits they'll give out while you're on strike and so forth. And so they're very necessary to have those dues. And they're not that much. I spoke to my brother recently, who, like I said, was retired, was a member of AFSCME, and asked him about what his dues were. And he said his dues were the equivalent of 1 hour of pay twice a month. And I don't know how much he made, but I'd say as a union correctional officer who had been there for over 20 years, he was probably making easily $25 an hour. Let's just say that for the sake of math. So he's making $25 an hour. So he had to pay 1 hour of pay twice a month. So that's $50. So for $50 a month, he got all that representation and benefits that the union provided for him. And that's not very much. That's not very much at all. If you look at an annual salary, you think $25 an hour for 365 days a year. I mean, obviously it doesn't work 365, but however the math comes out, $50 a month is nothing. Is nothing for all that benefit. But what the right to work laws say is that if you're in a union shop, in a union factory, you don't have to be in the union, which is fine, but you also don't have to pay the fees. But the federal laws also say that you have to have the benefits of the unions. Imagine that. So you're in a union shop, but you don't have to pay any fees, but you get all the benefits of being in the union. It's kind of like having a roommate who doesn't pay any of the bills, doesn't help, but you can't evict them. I mean, it's a crazy scenario. And so, of course, a lot of people say, well, hey, look, I can get all the benefits of being in the union without being in the union and without having to pay my $50 a month. And so, of course, a lot of people go that route. And what that does is it destroys the union because they don't have the money to do the things they need to do. They need to require everyone to do it. For example, if you had, a factory with 1,000 workers in it, and let's say the law says it's a union factory, it's a union factory, so therefore everyone in there gets the benefits of the union. But of those 1,000 workers, only 300 of them decide they're going to pay dues. That's 700 people riding on the coattails of the other 300. And what's funny to me is that's actually kind of socialism, something the Republicans really seem to hate. But here you are, you've got 300 people paying for the benefits of 700 other people, And that's pretty much what socialism is. So it's kind of a different situation. So you've got these people who are not having to pay fees but getting all the benefits. And of course, the unions can't survive with that. They need the money to do those benefits, to do all the things that they do. And so it's not a right to work, it's a right to bust unions, because management wants that. Management does not want collective bargaining. I'll give you an example of where collective bargaining works that's fairly recent and fairly local to us. Back under the Bush administration, the economy nearly collapsed. We had to do a bailout of the automotive industry and a lot of Wall Street bailouts. And it was a hard time, especially for the automotive industry. And it was because of the recession caused by the Republicans in control at that time. General Motors was on the brink of collapse. United Auto Workers, the union UAW that represents all these auto workers, said, look, we know this is a bad situation. This is not something that we can continue to allow go forward. We can't let the automotive industry collapse. If we do that, we're out of jobs. I mean, we're just unemployed. We go from being in a crisis situation to being unemployed. So the United Auto Workers went to GM and they met at the table, the bargaining table, and they decided they would do things like take a cut in pay, reduce some benefits, do things to help keep General Motors afloat while they tried to recover. And that, you think about it, that just makes sense. That's what a partnership is. That's what a good partnership is between management and labor. The problem is, fast forward 6 years or so, and General Motors is making billion-dollar profits. They are back in the black big time. They're not having any more financial difficulties. They've paid back all the bailout money, and so things are going great. And the union says, hey, you know all those concessions we made to help you? You know, we took pay cuts, we did this, we did that. We want that stuff back now. Which you would think, that's fair. Turnabout's fair play. You know, they took the cuts to help you stay afloat. Now that you're profiting again, you're going to give that back to them. Well, you can guess what General Motors said. No. We're going to continue to have record billion-dollar profits. We're going to continue to reward our shareholders. We're going to continue to reward our CEOs with multi-million-dollar a year salaries, but we can't afford to give you your benefits back. So General Motors went on strike. You saw that when the Corvette plant shut down for about 6 weeks, I think it was. That was all part of that strike. And imagine, again, the scenario. What if you were one person? You're not going to get anywhere. But imagine if you're the tens of thousands of workers that work for General Motors and other corporations across this country, and you all walk out the door. That kind of made General Motors have to come back to the bargaining table and talk things over. And sure enough, the union won out. They got their benefits back. There was give and take. Nobody got everything they wanted, but the company was held responsible to the obligations it had to its employees. And that's about the only way that ever happens, is when there's a union. So if we create these laws that say you can have all the benefits but don't have to pay the fees, people aren't going to pay the fees, but they're still going to want the benefits, and then the union's going to cease to exist. So these are union-busting laws, plain and simple. Another thing that kind of strikes me about the argument that right-to-work laws are good and unions are bad is when a union wants to form, let's say it's a new industry, somebody invents a new product or something, or a new industry, and a factory, there begins starting talk of, we need to unionize, we need to get organized labor, we need to do better. Do you know how it's decided whether or not a factory is unionized? How the union comes in? The workers vote on it. It's a vote. It's democracy in action. That's how a union comes into a plant. No one forces it on them. Yeah, the people will come in and try to sway them one way or the other. Pro-union people will come in, union people will come in, anti-union people will come in and talk. But ultimately, it's a vote by the workers in that plant. How can you be more democratic than that? That's what the Republicans say they're all about, is democracy. So what they're doing more or less is stripping away democracy. they're not allowing there to be a vote because there'll never be enough of a vote to do what the unions need to do. Let's give another example. Here in Glasgow, LSE Communications is in the process of closing down, and we're going to lose over 700 jobs. And that wasn't a union plant, and I'm just saying this is a hypothetical. Suppose it was a union plant. Suppose those 700 people, those 700 workers, men and women there, were members of a union. And LSC started to have these problems and went to the union reps and said, look, we're having these problems where, the market's changing, people are getting away from print magazines and so forth. We're thinking we may have to shut this plant down. Imagine they said that just to you. You're one worker. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I need to get ready to get fired. Or suppose they talked to a union that represented all the workers. The union might have been able to come back and say, oh, well, we don't want that. We'd like to keep all of our people working. Maybe we can do something like General Motors and UAW did, where maybe we all take a 10 or 15% pay cut for the next 2 years. Or we'd come up with some kind of thing where we kind of do what we can to help you stay open, because we'd much rather get a little less money and have you open than have you shut down completely and all of us be jobless. Maybe they could cut back on their benefits. Maybe they would say, we're willing to reduce, our health insurance benefits. We'll take a higher deductible. I mean, there's all kinds of things they could have talked about, but they didn't, because they didn't have to. And even if there was a union, LSE didn't have to. They still could have just said, we're just shutting down. But there would have been a lot more opportunity for discussion if there'd been a union. And that's the thing you need to realize. Unions are a two-way street. It's a chance for a corporation to talk to its employees through representation, kind of like how government works, as opposed to a little one person, one man or woman on the factory floor standing there having the company pound on them, and no way to respond except I'm going to hire my own lawyer and sue you, or I'm just going to have to walk away. One of the things, and I'm all for this, that a lot of people are stressing right now in government and education, both Democrat and Republican, I agree wholeheartedly, is work-ready communities. And the idea that not everyone is cut out for college. There's nothing wrong with getting a trade or a skill, welding or whatever. And I agree 100%. Not everyone is cut out for college. Not everyone wants to do college, and you shouldn't have to make a good living. But the problem is, the very place we're pushing these students coming out of high school are into the trade skills, and those are the jobs that are predominantly protected by unions. So we're in some ways setting up our children to not be as successful as they should be, because we're saying it's okay, you can be in this job, but you don't get to have any collective bargaining power. You can't negotiate better working conditions with your employer. You can just quit or hire your own attorney. So it's a really bad situation. But like I said, this bill was one of the first ones passed. I mean, literally within, I think, the first week or two, it was rammed through the House and the Senate, and Bevin signed off on it, because it's been on the agenda for the Republicans for years. And there are states, I don't know, probably 28 or more states that have right-to-work laws. Almost every southern state. I think we were the last southern state to do that. And what's amazing, the states with the right-to-work laws are the most impoverished states, the most uneducated states, the lowest level of education, the poorest health states. I mean, studies have been done. You look at the facts. If you have states that have right-to-work laws are the states that are suffering the most, and that's part of it. That's part of it. It's not all of it, but it's certainly part of it. So let me kind of wrap this up by saying I support unions wholeheartedly. I do not support right-to-work laws. I support everyone's right to have a good paying job with good paying benefits and to be in a union if that's what's voted in at their facility. I believe in collective bargaining. I believe in management and the employees working together, but that can only be done when the playing field is level. And that only works when you have management on one side and the employees represented by a union on the other. Otherwise, It's you're tilting at windmills. It's a little man, little woman just tilting at a windmill, and it's just not going to change. It's not going to be fixed. So that's why I support right the ability to unionize collective bargaining. It only benefits us. The only person that destroying unions benefits is corporations. Unions have been around since I said the 30s. They're very successful. Some people will say, well, unions are corrupt. It's like, well, you know what? There probably are some corrupt people in unions, but there's also corrupt people in politics, corrupt people in business, corrupt people everywhere. There's always going to be somebody somewhere that's corrupt, is going to take a bribe or do something they shouldn't or embezzle it. I mean, you just have to watch the national news and you see that every couple of weeks someone else is arrested for something like that. But you can't judge all of the unions by the corruption of a few, just like you can't judge all of Wall Street by the corruption of a few. It's just not fair. So I'm very much pro-union, pro-labor, pro-workers' rights. And I don't know more what else I can say about that. I can give you, here's another example. Here's an example of where non-union workers may have contributed to a catastrophe. Several months ago, the Hard Rock Hotel in New Orleans was under construction. And the contract for that was given to a non-union contractor. Louisiana is a right-to-work state. Therefore, they did not have to use unions, and they did not. As soon as construction got underway, IBEW and the plumbing union, the pipe fitters union, began protests outside of the construction zone, not only because, obviously, they were protesting because it wasn't a union construction site and union workers weren't being used, but because of the unsafe conditions they were seeing. You can find videos of online of workers who were working that were non-union workers that were even worried about the building, going through, taking video footage with their phones of temporary beams that were meant to support the ceiling while concrete cured starting to bend. You know, the union workers were saying, look, this is a dangerous situation. And of course, management was in charge and management didn't care. Management was saving money and getting the building built quick. That was their concern, profit, profit, profit. Whereas the union workers who weren't even working on the job were saying, there's danger here, there's danger here. And lo and behold, the building collapsed partway through construction. And I'm not saying it was just because it was non-union workers that the building collapsed. They're still trying to figure that out. I think they've cited 26 different contractors and subcontractors. Some city inspectors got fired or terminated or quit over it because they falsified reports. There was a lot of things involved. But imagine what would have happened if that had been a union construction site and those concerns would have come up. And instead of just filming it on their phone and posting it to Facebook and asking, what are we going to do? What if there had been a union steward and a union staff there to say, we're walking off. We're walking off the site. We're calling the city building inspectors. We're going to file a grievance. We're going to call OSHA and keep our workers safe. And as it was, three workers did die in that building. The collapse is still, the building's still there. It's so unstable. 2 workers are still trapped in it. One's buried completely. And the other one, this is what's awful, from the waist down, he's hanging out of the building. They had to put a tarp up over him. And his family has to know every day when they see that tarp that their loved one is behind that tarp, you know, and not coming back. And they have no closure. They can't get the body out of either one of those 2 workers. And I'm not saying a union would have saved that, would have fixed that completely, but I think a union would have helped an awful lot in a situation like that. I don't think the building would have ever got to the point of collapsing with workers in it if there was a union. So again, I'm a strong supporter of unions, of collective bargaining. It should be a 2-way street of communication and bargaining, but the unfortunate reality of it is, in most businesses today, large businesses, you know, million and billion dollar companies. I'm not talking your mom and pop shops, you know, around the square in Glasgow or anything like that. But I'm talking these huge companies, these huge conglomerates. The worker's pretty much expendable. I can replace them. Go ahead and quit. I don't care. I'll bring someone else in. Or even more prominent is, oh, you've been with us 20 years. You make 4 times the salary of what a new person would be able to make. let's see if we can't find a way, some kind of excuse to fire you so I can replace you with a new hire and pay them a lot less. That happens a lot. And unions would take care of that. Unions would be like, nope, that ain't going to happen. Union's going to step in and stop that from happening. But in a non-union shop, that happens a lot of time. People nearing retirement age, forced into early retirement, or being fired, losing their benefits, losing out on benefits early because they were fired early because it's cheaper to fire them, maybe have them sue us, but probably not because they can't afford it on their own, and replace them with a cheaper new worker. So I don't see any downside to unions, honestly. I mean, a lot of people go, well, it makes things cost more. It's like, maybe a little, but I'm willing to pay $2 or $3 more for that auto part that I need to repair my car if it means somebody's family somewhere is being taken care of. I don't think it's that big of a deal. We should all help each other, and we should shop union shops. We should support union shops, and we should support unionization here in Kentucky. We need to get back on the right track with labor. We need to stop coddling to corporations. I'm not saying we should punish them. I'm just saying the worker needs to come first, then the corporation. And that's where I stand on this issue. Thank you very much, and you have a great day.